They vowed to take over Gaza with a single statement. Can you imagine the shock that rippled across political circles when these words, supposedly uttered by none other than United States President Donald Trump, began circulating in public? Yes, that is exactly how fiery the rhetoric has become around the escalating crisis in Gaza, and that is just the beginning of this remarkable tale. Why is Trump, a man never short on headline-grabbing moves, suddenly talking about forging an ironclad agreement to halt what some observers have labeled a fast-moving humanitarian catastrophe? Today we are diving deep into a situation that has stirred political tempers on both sides of the Atlantic, and well beyond. We will dissect the main question at the heart of this unfolding drama. Could President Trump truly compel Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to bring the Gaza offensive to a close and end what many are calling a genocide? Trump's previous statements that Israel ought to make the deal in Gaza didn't prompt an immediate shift in Tel Aviv's strategy. But now, with tensions in the Middle East at fever pitch and fresh from a similarly explosive confrontation with Iran that seemed to evaporate as suddenly as it began, there might be a brief window for diplomacy. Is this just empty rhetoric aimed at snatching another diplomatic trophy for Trump's legacy? Or could we see genuine relief for the tens of thousands of families caught between the crossfire of bombs and vows of revenge? In this in-depth report, we will explore some fundamental questions. How did we get to a place where a meeting between the President of the United States and the Prime Minister of Israel has become the axis upon which the hopes for peace in Gaza might turn? Why has Netanyahu, who projects the image of a steadfast leader, chosen now for his third visit to the United States since the start of Trump's presidency in January of this year? And, crucially, is there any credibility to the rumors that the 12-day war with Iran has somehow created new political capital for forging a truce in Gaza? Over the next several minutes, we're going to peel back the layers of political theater that have shaped recent developments. We will uncover how the Israeli Prime Minister's legal entanglements might be influencing his decisions on the international stage, ask whether the White House's position of "we may withhold aid" has as much teeth as it claims, and shed light on the humanitarian crisis unfolding on the ground in Gaza, where hospitals are said to be stretched to a breaking point and access to basic services is threatened daily. By tracing the winding path that has led us from fiery rhetoric to potential breakthroughs, we'll see whether there is a genuine opportunity for a ceasefire or merely more grandstanding. If you find yourself enthralled by how geopolitics can turn on a dime, tap the like button to show your interest, because the next part of this story is about to get even more unpredictable. First, let's travel back in time to the beginning of these latest tensions. The region has known conflict for decades, yet all it took was one particularly bold move in early autumn. Reports say Hamas launched a significant attack on 7 October 2023 that reignited the long-simmering tensions into a blazing inferno. Israel's immediate response was a massive military operation aimed at rooting out further threats. But as is so often the case, countless civilians in Gaza have found themselves in the line of fire, prompting global outcry over the scale of devastation. Enter Donald Trump, a man who never misses an opportunity to attract the spotlight. The president openly declared he hoped to see some kind of truce in place by sometime next week. That comment alone was enough to create fresh waves of media speculation. Observers recall all too well how, during his first term, Trump presented himself as a champion of peace deals in the Middle East, though, of course, not without controversy. This time around, the president's stance appears even more aggressive. He vows to be very firm with his Israeli counterpart, Prime Minister Netanyahu, about ending what has been described by many outsiders as a form of collective punishment in Gaza. This vow, revealed during Trump's recent tour of a migrant detention center in Florida, left pundits guessing about whether the president truly plans to clamp down on the Israeli leader's freedom of action. Blocking out the background noise, the main puzzle remains fairly straightforward. Will Netanyahu acquiesce to the pressure? The prime minister's position has always been to embrace a strong defense posture, especially following Hamas's assault. But the tide may be shifting. Rumors abound that he is seeking a lifeline to lessen the political pressure at home. Some say that a prime minister under investigation for corruption charges might be more willing to appear conciliatory to placate foreign allies. Others dismiss such talk as just more political gossip. Determined to steer the narrative, the White House has scheduled Netanyahu's third visit to the United States in 2025 for the 7th of July. an occasion that, notably, arrives on the heels of the abrupt end to what was described as a tempestuous 12-day war with Iran. That conflict itself was a whirlwind, overshadowed by a sudden United States bombing mission on Iranian nuclear sites, culminating in a precarious stalemate that allowed Washington to claim a victory of sorts. Now, with tensions in Tehran momentarily cooled, is it possible that the White House sees the Gaza situation as the next target for a peace deal? No stranger to big gestures, President Trump has signaled that he wants to add yet another success to his roster of historic agreements. Earlier in his second term, he boasted of forging deals between previously antagonistic neighbors and insisted that the stage was set to bring decades of conflict in the region to an end. And yet, while the president's statements are often flamboyant, the actual conditions on the ground in Gaza are far less clear-cut. Throughout the Palestinian territory, the conflict has remained almost relentless since that fateful Hamas attack on 7 October. Civilians have been steadily caught in the crossfire, with hospitals reportedly on the brink of collapse due to supply shortages, scenes of families fleeing their homes, neighborhoods torn apart by airstrikes, and local leaders pleading for outside intervention fill the headlines. Each day that passes without a truce ratchets up what many in the international community have decried as a shocking humanitarian toll. And so, the burning question emerges: could Trump really dislodge Netanyahu's resolute approach? After all, the Israeli leader, while not immune to outside pressure, has historically been steadfast, especially during crises. This is, after all, a prime minister whose entire political brand rests on strength, security, and national defense. Skeptics argue that Netanyahu can't afford to appear weak. The offsetting perspective is that if the White House threatens to withhold vital support, Israel might feel the pinch, particularly given Trump's occasional statements hinting at a possible review of aid if Netanyahu doesn't address certain domestic issues. Could that overshadow the prime minister's home turf priorities? Only time will tell. By the way, if this entire saga has you at the edge of your seat and you want to keep tabs on developments like these, feel free to subscribe for ongoing in-depth looks at global politics. Trust me, this story is only going to get more intense. Let's step back and ask, how significant is it that Trump publicly, I repeat publicly, pledged to be very firm with Netanyahu regarding the Gaza offensive? Some experts believe that it marks a notable departure from the usual White House posture of strong alignment with Israel's strategic preferences. Typically, American presidents stand shoulder to shoulder with Tel Aviv, at least in public. But Trump's vow might suggest a pivot, or at the very least, an acknowledgement that the optics of unreservedly backing further strikes in Gaza are no longer politically tenable. The evidence? The president explicitly labeled the ongoing campaign as a genocide. That language alone pummels the usual diplomatic restraints and signals an urgent readiness to push for de-escalation. Behind this rhetoric, though, lurks a lesser explored angle: the domestic blowback not only in Israel, but also in the United States. Netanyahu has faced significant legal challenges for many months, stirring up anger and protest from parts of the Israeli population who feel let down by a leader entangled in corruption allegations. Meanwhile, Trump's decision to raise the stakes by hinting that he might withhold critical U.S. support or demand the dropping of legal charges has caused an uproar among opposition factions who see it as meddling in another nation's judicial process. Some wonder if Trump is crossing a line that no U.S. president should approach. Nevertheless, the question remains: does Netanyahu himself want an exit ramp? On the one hand, continuing the military campaign in Gaza shores up his standing with Israeli conservatives who prioritize robust retaliation in response to Hamas's October assault. On the other hand, mounting international condemnation, and especially the risk of tension with Washington, poses real dangers for Israel's strategic interests. Even a prime minister as determined as Netanyahu may find it difficult to press forward indefinitely if the White House grows cold. The entire dynamic is reminiscent of a high-stakes chess match, with every piece carefully maneuvered to prevent checkmate. How does the apparently concluded 12-day war with Iran factor into this scenario? According to the official narrative, that confrontation ended more smoothly than anyone would have predicted, leaving Trump unusually buoyed by the possibility of launching a bold new peace push in Gaza. The White House's eagerness to follow up one success with another might be just the impetus needed to lean harder on Netanyahu during the upcoming meeting. Observers note that Trump has always been keen to burnish his roster of wins on the global stage, and a ceasefire in Gaza, perhaps even a more formal arrangement, would be a substantial deflection from criticisms of chaos in his foreign policy elsewhere. Now, to appreciate the sense of urgency that underpins these developments, consider the harrowing situation in Gaza itself. The territory, densely populated with over 2 million residents concentrated in a confined coastal strip, has endured more than 2 decades of intermittent strife. In the last few weeks alone, the images of displaced families, crumbling buildings, and relentless airstrikes have drawn condemnation from international organizations. Calls for a corridor to allow humanitarian aid have swept across social media. Even the possibility of a short truce could be life-changing for those trapped without adequate health care, sanitation, or shelter. That, more than any tweet or soundbite, underscores how desperately the region needs a respite. Yet this backdrop of humanitarian urgency collides with the tough political postures that both sides have adopted. Netanyahu does not want to be seen as caving to foreign pressure, especially during a period when his domestic credibility may be weaker than usual. Trump, for his part, thrives on being the changemaker and might be willing to employ an array of unorthodox strategies to get a quick resolution that can be packaged as a triumph. The potential for misreading each other's intentions is high. Allies are on edge. Meanwhile, mediators scramble in the background, hoping to broker relentless back-channel communications. The entire tapestry is rife with tension, which means that the meeting on the 7th of July could prove to be a defining moment. As the countdown to that date ticks away, journalists and diplomats alike anticipate a slew of closed-door discussions. The nature of bipartisanship in Washington is such that not everyone in the U.S. Congress stands behind the president's gambit. Additionally, some figures within Netanyahu's cabinet reportedly question the wisdom of traveling to the United States at such a pivotal juncture, especially if it means risking confrontation. Yet the trip seems locked in, ensuring that speculation about possible breakthroughs or spectacular public disagreements will only intensify. Beyond the official statements, one can't ignore the swirl of conspiracy theories that has bubbled up on social platforms. Some claim that the entire standoff is orchestrated by powerful players who want to destabilize both Trump and Netanyahu. Others suspect the president is using the chaos in Gaza to distract from troubles in his own administration, though perhaps that angle lacks solid proof. In any case, the rumors reflect just how polarized and suspicious the public has become whenever Middle East affairs and top-tier superpower politics converge. From a broader geopolitical standpoint, the outcome of this tussle could foreshadow how international institutions react to future crises. If the White House manages to impose constraints on Netanyahu's military strategy by threatening to withhold crucial partnership benefits, it might signal a shift in how aggressively the American executive branch can influence its allies' conduct. But if Netanyahu resists, effectively calling Trump's bluff, then we may see the limits of presidential pressure in real time. Should that happen, it might embolden other nations to test Washington's will, resulting in a domino effect across global hotspots. We should also address the moral weight that has emerged around the word genocide, a label so powerful it immediately amplifies moral outrage. Historically, states are extremely cautious about labeling an armed conflict or crackdown as genocide because it triggers urgent condemnation and potential legal ramifications under international law. So, when Trump himself uses that phrase, it signals a willingness to adopt language that might upset staunch allies. Could it be that the president is employing shock tactics to stampede Netanyahu into compliance, or is he merely echoing the calls of human rights groups? We may never know the full calculus, but it has turned the rhetorical temperature up several notches. Meanwhile, ordinary people in Gaza see little hope if the violence persists. Nonprofit organizations report an alarming rate of displacement from heavily bombarded blocks, with some families fleeing multiple times in a single week. The flow of humanitarian supplies is sporadic, and local clinics are approaching critical shortages. By some accounts, the region is on the precipice of an even greater humanitarian disaster unless a ceasefire is arranged soon. That urgency places intense pressure on all sides to produce more than lip service in the coming days. The swirl of factors is almost dizzying. Trump's personal style of diplomacy, Netanyahu's precarious domestic position, the legacy of the abrupt conflict with Iran, and the real possibility that a missed opportunity now could spiral into further tragedy. Tying everything together is the White House meeting date, looming, pregnant with the possibility of a major shift or an anticlimactic letdown. Israel's prime minister has shown in the past that he can act with surprising pragmatism when he perceives that the alternative might be even more detrimental. But analysts caution that if he feels cornered, Netanyahu tends to double down, banking on unwavering support from key factions in Israeli society to see him through. We can't ignore the potential for behind-the-scenes negotiation that might shape the outcome long before the official handshake moment in front of cameras. Diplomatic envoys, White House staffers, Israeli defense officials, scores of individuals undoubtedly have their phones buzzing at all hours, delicately trying to spin the best possible advantage for themselves. Each side is aware that the slightest misstep could prompt a steep fall in public support, whether in Washington, Tel Aviv, or internationally. In the run-up to the meeting, the rhetorical intensity seems to heighten day by day. Trump's antagonists criticize his approach as rushed and overly theatrical, contending that real peace demands careful negotiation and consensus building over time, not sudden leaps. Netanyahu's supporters claim that the prime minister has every right to continue defending Israel until Hamas no longer poses a credible threat, and that pausing too early could embolden extremist elements. Yet, overshadowing all these strategic arguments is a stark reality. The clock is ticking for the people of Gaza, whose daily survival needs are dangerously in flux. At this juncture, you might be wondering, where do the other international players stand? The European Union, Russia, and regional powers like Turkey or Egypt typically play a role as well. Some have criticized the relative silence from various international communities, while others believe that behind closed doors, frantic discussions are happening. It remains to be seen whether there is a possibility of a multi-party agreement that Trump can wave as proof of a new era of regional stability. Alternatively, if the meeting falls apart, these players may step in to fill the diplomatic gap. The role of these actors, though somewhat diminished in the shadow of American and Israeli developments, is crucial to watch. Curiously, this entire drama also intersects with Trump's re-election campaign in ways that are more significant than they may appear. A decisive foreign policy success often bolsters a president's standing at home, appealing to voters who value strong leadership on the international stage. Should Trump emerge from the meeting with a pledge from Netanyahu to cease the Gaza offensive, it could become a campaign talking point, overshadowing controversies regarding domestic policies or prior conflicts. Conversely, a highly publicized failure might spark further criticism of the president's handling of complex global issues. As we approach the final stretch of this deep dive, it's worth reflecting on the cyclical nature of Middle Eastern politics and American presidencies. Repeated attempts at forging lasting peace deals often fall short, sometimes because of deep-seated mistrust, sometimes due to the complexities on the ground, and occasionally from leadership that prioritizes short-term political gains over genuine resolution. Nonetheless, each new attempt brings with it a blush of hope that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. Imagining the White House, all glistening marble and imposing columns, one can almost picture the tense hush that will descend when Trump and Netanyahu meet. Perhaps photographers will be ushered in for the customary handshake, the forced smiles, the measured posturing. Behind the scenes, the real negotiations could be a cacophony of raised voices, pointed accusations, and desperate pleas. Will the day end with an official statement unveiling an agreement, or will we read ominous captions about how the two sides have substantial differences that must still be resolved? No matter the official line, the immediate future of 2 million people in Gaza could hinge on how the conversation goes. If a truce is established, even if it is partial or temporary, the window for delivering humanitarian aid and possibly opening a broader political dialogue might arrive at last. If no progress is made, the status quo's suffering continues unabated, marking another chapter of heartbreak in a story that has dragged on for far too many decades. And so, this is the tale we find ourselves in. A president known for his unorthodox style, a prime minister clinging to political survival amidst legal storms, a region perched on the brink of crisis, and millions of eyes watching to see if the upcoming summit can spark a real turning point. Every so often, history offers a fleeting chance to change the narrative. Whether it slips away or is seized is the puzzle that will unravel very soon. Stay tuned, because once the dust settles, we may be witnessing a moment no less dramatic than anything conjured by the most imaginative thriller novelist. Will Trump's vow of being very firm pave the road to a lasting ceasefire? And will Netanyahu see more to gain than lose by embracing a negotiated peace? The stakes could hardly be higher. Thank you for joining us on this extensive journey through the labyrinth of Middle Eastern diplomacy, American presidential power plays, and the heartbreak in Gaza. If you want to see how this saga concludes, and whether it brings a spark of hope to a region in dire need, remember to check back regularly for updates. Because when it comes to politics of this magnitude, every detail, even the smallest shift, might mean the difference between yet another wave of conflict or finally, at long last, a path toward calm.